Cop stops teen girl running from home, breaks down when he discovers she's pregnant from her stepfather. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the asphalt of Highway 17, a two-lane stretch of road that snaked its way through the rolling hills of rural Ohio. Officer Mark Daniels, a veteran of the State Patrol with 20 years on the force, cruised along in his patrol car, the hum of the engine a familiar, comforting sound. He was nearing the end of his shift, his thoughts drifting towards the evening's plans, a quiet dinner with his wife, Sarah, and maybe catching up on the latest baseball scores. Daniels was a man of routine and order, a stickler for the rules, but with a core of compassion that had been honed by years of witnessing both the best and worst of humanity. He was in his late 40s, his face weathered by sun and wind, his eyes a keen, observant blue, framed by lines that spoke of long hours and countless miles. He had a quiet strength about him, a calm demeanor that often diffused tense situations. He'd seen a lot in his 2 decades on the force traffic accidents, domestic disputes, drunk drivers, the occasional small-town crime. But nothing could have fully prepared him for what he was about to encounter. As he rounded a bend in the highway, he saw her, a young girl, running along the shoulder of the road, her movements frantic, desperate. She was barefoot, her feet visibly bloodied, her clothes disheveled. She looked to be in her mid-teens, her long, dark hair streaming behind her like a banner of distress. Daniel's first instinct was that she was a runaway, maybe involved in some kind of petty theft. He pulled over, activating his lights and siren, the sudden burst of sound cutting through the quiet afternoon. The girl stopped, turning towards him, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. She looked younger than he initially thought, maybe 15 or 16. Her face was pale, streaked with tears and dirt, her breathing ragged. "Hey there," Daniels said, his voice calm and reassuring as he approached her. "What's going on? Are you all right?" The girl just stared at him, her body trembling. She seemed unable to speak, her eyes darting back and forth between him and the road ahead, as if she was contemplating running again. "You're hurt," Daniels said, noticing the blood on her feet. "Let's get you some help." He reached out a hand, gently touching her arm. The girl flinched, but she didn't pull away. He noticed the slight swell of her stomach beneath her loose-fitting t-shirt, a detail that didn't quite register at first, his mind still focused on the immediate situation. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer now. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Mia. Mia, I'm Officer Daniels. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me what happened?" Mia looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She started to sob, her body shaking uncontrollably. Daniels knelt down, trying to get on her level, to make her feel less threatened. "It's okay, Mia," he said. "You're safe now. Just tell me what happened." And then, in a rush of words, the horrifying truth came tumbling out. He did this to me," Mia sobbed, clutching her stomach. "My stepfather. He raped me. I'm pregnant." Daniels felt a cold wave of shock wash over him. The words hit him like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. He stared at Mia, his mind struggling to process the enormity of her statement. This wasn't a runaway, a petty thief. This was a victim, a child who had been subjected to unspeakable abuse. He looked at her again, really looked at her, and the pieces started to fall into place: the fear in her eyes, the disheveled clothes, the bloodied feet, the slight swell of her belly. It was all there, a horrifying tapestry of violence and betrayal. "And my mom," Mia continued, her voice barely a whisper, "she knows. She pretends she doesn't, but she knows." The words twisted in Daniel's gut like a knife. The betrayal by her own mother, the willful blindness, the complicity, it was almost too much to comprehend. A wave of anger, hot and fierce, surged through him. He wanted to find this man, this stepfather, and make him pay for what he had done. But he knew he had to stay calm, to focus on Mia, to get her the help she needed. He stood up, his hand still resting gently on Mia's shoulder. "It's okay, Mia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe now. I'm going to get you help. I promise you, I'm going to get you help." He helped Mia into the back seat of his patrol car, wrapping her in a blanket he kept for emergencies. As he sat there, looking at her, her small, fragile form huddled in the corner, he felt tears welling up in his eyes. He blinked them back, forcing himself to regain control. He had a job to do. He had a promise to keep. He would bring this perpetrator to justice, and he would protect this young girl, no matter what it took. The barefoot girl on the highway had shattered his routine, his quiet evening plans, and his perception of the world. She had opened his eyes to a darkness he had hoped never to see, and she had ignited within him a fierce determination to fight for justice, for Mia, and for all victims of such unspeakable crimes. The white clapboard house with the faded green shutters stood on a quiet street in Maplewood, a small town nestled amidst the rolling farmland of central Ohio. It looked like any other house on the block, a picture of suburban normalcy, with a neatly trimmed lawn, a basketball hoop in the driveway, and a swing set in the backyard. But behind the closed doors, behind the carefully crafted facade, a nightmare was unfolding. Mia had lived in that house for most of her life. Her early childhood had been relatively happy, if a little lonely. Her father had left when she was very young, a distant memory of a smiling face and a strong embrace. Her mother, Susan, had worked long hours at the local diner, struggling to make ends meet. Mia had learned to be independent, to take care of herself, to find solace in books and her own imagination. Everything changed when Robert entered the picture. He was Susan's boyfriend, then fiancé, and 5 years ago, her stepfather. He was a carpenter, a big, burly man with a booming laugh and a charming smile that could disarm even the most skeptical observer. At first, Robert had seemed like a blessing. He had brought stability to their lives, a sense of security that Mia had never known. He had fixed up the house, bought Mia new clothes, and taken them on family outings to the local amusement park and the county fair. But the charm was a mask, a carefully constructed disguise that hid a dark and sinister nature. It started subtly, with small gestures, fleeting touches that Mia initially dismissed as accidental. A hand on her shoulder that lingered a little too long, a hug that felt a little too tight, a brush of his leg against hers under the dinner table. Mia would tell herself she was imagining things, that she was being silly. She didn't want to believe that Robert, the man who had brought so much happiness to her mother, could be capable of anything untoward. But the gestures became more frequent, more insistent. He would find excuses to be alone with her, complimenting her on her appearance, telling her how pretty she was, how grown-up she was becoming. His eyes would linger on her body, making her feel uncomfortable, ashamed. She tried to talk to her mother about it, hinting at her discomfort, but Susan would brush it off, telling her she was being overly sensitive, that Robert was just being friendly. "He's trying to be a good stepfather, Mia," Susan would say. "Don't be so ungrateful." Mia started to doubt herself, to question her own perceptions. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe she was the problem. But then the touching escalated. One evening, while Susan was working late, Robert came into Mia's room while she was studying. He sat on her bed, his weight making the mattress sag. He started talking, his voice low and husky, about how she was becoming a young woman, how beautiful she was. His hand reached out, stroking her hair, then moving down to her cheek, her neck. Mia froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to scream, to push him away, but she couldn't move. She was paralyzed by fear. He leaned closer, his breath hot on her face, his eyes dark and predatory. And then, the memory was a black hole in Mia's mind, a void she couldn't bear to confront. But the aftermath was impossible to ignore. The shame, the guilt, the constant feeling of being dirty, violated. She became withdrawn, isolating herself from her friends, spending most of her time alone in her room. She started wearing baggy clothes, trying to hide her body, to make herself invisible. The abuse continued, a horrifying cycle of violation and silence. Robert would find ways to be alone with her, in the hallway, in the kitchen, in her bedroom. He would touch her, whisper obscene things in her ear, threaten her if she ever told anyone. Mia lived in constant fear, trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. She felt utterly alone, betrayed by her mother, violated by her stepfather, with nowhere to turn. The pregnancy was the ultimate betrayal, a constant, physical reminder of the horror she had endured. She missed her period, then another. She took a home pregnancy test, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The 2 pink lines appeared like a death sentence. She considered telling Susan, begging for help, but the fear was too strong. She knew her mother wouldn't believe her, that she would side with Robert. She was trapped, with no way out. The running, the desperate flight on that fateful afternoon had been a moment of pure instinct, a primal urge to escape. She hadn't planned it, hadn't thought it through. She had simply reached her breaking point. She had been in her room, studying, when she heard Robert's truck pull into the driveway. Her heart had started a race, her body trembling with fear. She knew what was coming, the inevitable confrontation, the violation. And then, something inside her snapped. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to get out. She grabbed her backpack, throwing in a few essentials, a change of clothes, some money she had saved from babysitting, a picture of her and her mother from happier times. She slipped out the back door, unnoticed, and started running. She ran as fast as she could, her bare feet pounding against the pavement, not knowing where she was going, only knowing that she had to get away. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs ached, until her feet were raw and bleeding. She ran until she reached the highway, the endless ribbon of asphalt stretching out before her, a symbol of escape, of hope. And then, she saw the flashing lights of the patrol car, the figure of Officer Daniels approaching her, and her desperate flight came to an end. The echoes of silence, the years of unspoken abuse, were finally broken, shattered by her desperate cry for help. The house of cards, the carefully constructed facade of a normal family, was about to come crashing down. The sterile, white walls of the hospital room seemed to amplify the silence, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor and Mia's soft, occasional sobs. Officer Daniels sat beside her bed, his hand resting gently on her arm, a silent offering of comfort and support. He had called for an ambulance and a Child Protective Services (CPS) representative as soon as he had gotten Mia safely into his patrol car. He had listened, his heart breaking, as she recounted the horrific details of her abuse, the years of violation, the betrayal by her own mother. The weight of her story pressed down on him, a heavy burden of responsibility and outrage. He had seen a lot in his 20 years on the force, but this was different. This was a child, a victim of unspeakable cruelty, and he felt a fierce, protective instinct towards her. He thought of his own daughter, Emily, who was just a few years younger than Mia. The thought of Emily being subjected to such horror sent a chill down his spine, a surge of anger that threatened to consume him. He couldn't imagine, wouldn't allow himself to imagine, such a thing happening to his own child. But it had happened to Mia, and he was determined to do everything in his power to help her, to bring her abuser to justice, and to ensure that she never had to face such terror again. He looked at Mia, her small, fragile form curled up on the hospital bed, her face pale and tear-streaked. She looked so young, so vulnerable, and he felt a wave of empathy wash over him. He wanted to take away her pain, to erase the trauma, to give her back the innocence that had been stolen from her. But he knew he couldn't. He could only offer his support, his protection, and his unwavering commitment to seeking justice. He thought back to his own childhood, to a difficult period in his teenage years when he had felt lost and alone. He had been bullied relentlessly, subjected to verbal and physical abuse that had left him scarred and insecure. He had never told anyone, had suffered in silence, until a kind teacher had noticed his distress and offered him a lifeline. That teacher's intervention had changed his life, had given him the strength to overcome his challenges and to find his path. He had always been grateful for that act of kindness, and he had vowed to pay it forward, to help others who were struggling, who were victims of injustice. Now Mia was his chance to fulfill that vow. He would be her lifeline, her protector, her advocate. He would not let her down. The CPS representative, a woman named MS. Ramirez, arrived at the hospital. She was a calm, compassionate woman with a gentle demeanor. She spoke with Mia, explaining the process, assuring her that she was safe and that they would find her a place to stay. Daniels watched as MS. Ramirez interacted with Mia, her voice soothing, her touch reassuring. He was grateful for her presence, for her expertise in handling such sensitive situations. He knew that Mia needed more than just law enforcement. She needed emotional support, counseling, and a safe environment. After MS, Ramirez left. Daniel sat with Mia for a while longer, just talking. He didn't press her for details about the abuse. He just let her talk, letting her share whatever she was comfortable with. He told her about his own family, about his wife, Sarah, and his daughter, Emily. He told her about his love of baseball, his passion for history, his small-town upbringing. He tried to create a sense of normalcy, a connection that transcended the horrific circumstances that had brought them together. As he talked, he saw a flicker of warmth in Mia's eyes, a hint of a smile on her lips. It was a small thing, but it was a sign of hope, a testament to her resilience. Before leaving the hospital, Daniels gave Mia his card. "Call me anytime," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "If you need anything at all, just call. I'll be there." Mia took the card, clutching it tightly in her hand, as if it were a lifeline. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and trust. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For believing me." Daniels nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Her words, so simple yet so profound, struck him to the core. He had believed her from the moment he saw her running barefoot on the highway, from the moment he heard the terror in her voice. He had believed her, and he would continue to believe in her, to fight for her, until justice was served. As he drove away from the hospital, the weight of the badge felt heavier than ever. It was a symbol of authority, of responsibility, of the duty to protect and serve. But it was also a symbol of hope, of the power to make a difference, to help those who were vulnerable and in need. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult for both him and Mia. There would be legal battles, emotional turmoil, and the lingering scars of trauma. But he was determined to see it through, to stand by Mia's side, to be a constant presence in her life, a source of strength and support. He thought of his wife, Sarah, and how he would tell her about Mia, about the horrific abuse, about the young girl's courage and resilience. He knew Sarah would be heartbroken, but he also knew she would be supportive, that she would understand his commitment to this case. He thought of his daughter, Emily, and he made a silent vow to protect her, to cherish her, to teach her about the importance of respect, of consent, of speaking out against injustice. The weight of the badge was heavy, but it was also a source of strength, a reminder of his purpose, his calling. He would carry that weight with pride, with determination, and with a fierce commitment to justice for Mia and for all victims of abuse. He would be their voice, their shield, their advocate. He would not rest until the perpetrator was brought to justice, and until Mia was safe, secure, and on the path to healing. The internal struggle, the emotional turmoil, had only strengthened his resolve, hardening his determination to make a difference, to be a force for good in a world that often seemed too dark, too cruel. The flashing lights of the patrol cars illuminated the quiet street in Maplewood, casting an eerie glow on the white clapboard house with the faded green shutters. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. The scene was a stark contrast to the peaceful, suburban normalcy that usually characterized the neighborhood. Officer Daniels, accompanied by two other officers, approached the front door, his hand resting on his holster, his senses on high alert. He knew this could be a volatile situation, confronting a suspected abuser in his own home. He had obtained a warrant for Robert's arrest, based on Mia's statement and the preliminary medical examination. He knocked firmly on the door, his voice booming through the quiet night. "Police! Open up!" There was a moment of silence. then the sound of shuffling footsteps. The door creaked open, revealing Susan, Mia's mother, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What do you want?" "We're here to speak with Robert Miller," Daniel said, his voice firm but controlled. "Is he home?" Susan hesitated, her eyes darting nervously towards the interior of the house. He's in the living room," she stammered. "What's this all about?" "We have a warrant for his arrest," Daniel said, holding up the document. "We need to speak with him immediately." Susan's face crumpled, her composure cracking under the weight of the situation. She stepped aside, allowing the officers to enter the house. The living room was dimly lit, the only light coming from a flickering television screen. Robert was sitting on the couch, a beer in his hand, his face a mask of anger and defiance. He looked up as the officers entered, his eyes narrowing. "What the hell is this?" he growled. "What are you doing in my house?" "Robert Miller," Daniel said, his voice clear and authoritative, "you're under arrest for aggravated assault, sexual abuse, and endangering the welfare of a child." Robert's face turned red with rage. He stood up, his large frame towering over the officers. "You've got the wrong guy," he snarled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "We have a statement from your stepdaughter, Mia," Daniel said. "She has accused you of repeated sexual abuse and physical assault." Robert scoffed. "That little liar," he spat. "She's making all up. She's a troubled kid. Always has been. She's just trying to get attention." Daniels felt a surge of anger at Robert's callous denial, his blatant attempt to discredit Mia. But he kept his voice calm, his demeanor professional. "We have medical evidence to support her claims," Daniels said. "We also have a warrant for your arrest. You need to come with us." Robert hesitated, his eyes darting around the room, as if looking for an escape route. But he knew he was cornered. He reluctantly submitted to the officers, allowing them to handcuff him and lead him out of the house. As he was being escorted to the patrol car, Robert turned to Susan, his face contorted with rage. "You did this, didn't you?" he accused. "You put her up to this." Susan stared at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. She didn't say a word, her silence a tacit admission of her complicity. The officers placed Robert in the back of the patrol car and drove away, leaving Susan standing alone on the porch, the flashing lights illuminating her shattered world. The house of cards, the carefully constructed facade of a normal family, had come crashing down. The truth, the ugly, horrifying truth, had been exposed. And Susan was left to face the consequences of her choices, her silence, her betrayal. The following days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and investigations. Detectives interviewed neighbors, friends, and family members, piecing together a picture of the Miller household, a picture of a controlling, abusive stepfather and a mother who turned a blind eye to her daughter's suffering. Susan was questioned extensively by the police. She initially denied any knowledge of the abuse, claiming that Mia was lying, that she was a troubled teenager with a history of behavioral problems. But as the evidence mounted, as the detectives presented her with Mia's statement, the medical reports, and the testimony of other witnesses, her defenses began to crumble. She started to contradict herself, to stumble over her words, to reveal the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. Finally, she broke down, admitting that she had known about the abuse, that she had seen the bruises on Mia's body, that she had heard her crying at night. She confessed that she had been afraid of Robert, afraid of what he would do to her, to Mia, if she spoke out. "I was trapped," she sobbed. "I didn't know what to do. I thought if I just ignored it, it would go away." Her confession, though late, was a crucial piece of the puzzle. It corroborated Mia's story and exposed the full extent of Robert's depravity. It also revealed Susan's own culpability, her failure to protect her child, her willingness to sacrifice Mia's well-being for her own perceived safety. The house on Maplewood, once a symbol of suburban normalcy, was now a crime scene, a testament to the darkness that could lurk behind closed doors, the secrets that could fester beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. The carefully constructed facade had been shattered, revealing the ugly truth, the broken lives, the shattered dreams. In the legal process, the wheels of justice have begun to turn slowly but surely towards accountability and, hopefully, towards healing. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of lavender from a small diffuser on the bedside table. Mia lay in a private room at the Children's Advocacy Center, a specialized facility designed to provide a safe and supportive environment for child victims of abuse. The room was softly lit, decorated with colorful artwork and child-friendly furniture, a stark contrast to the sterile environment of the hospital emergency room. She had been examined by a doctor who specialized in child abuse cases, a kind, gentle woman who had explained everything in detail, ensuring Mia understood the process and felt comfortable. The examination had been difficult, a necessary but painful intrusion, a reminder of the violation she had endured. But the doctor had been patient and understanding, reassuring Mia that she was safe and that she was not to blame. After the examination, Mia had been introduced to Sarah Jenkins, a therapist who specialized in working with victims of trauma. Sarah was a warm, empathetic woman with a calming presence. She had spoken to Mia in a gentle voice, explaining that she was there to help her, to listen to her, to support her through the healing process. "It's okay to feel scared, Mia," Sarah had said. "It's okay to feel angry, sad, confused. All of your feelings are valid. You've been through something incredibly difficult, and it's going to take time to heal." Mia had nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. She had felt so alone for so long, so trapped in her own fear and shame. It was a relief to finally have someone to talk to, someone who understood, someone who believed her. Sarah had explained that Mia would be staying at the Advocacy Center for a few days until a more permanent placement could be found. She would have her own room, access to counseling and support services, and a safe, nurturing environment. "We're here to help you, Mia," Sarah had said. "We're here to protect you and to help you heal. You're not alone." Mia had spent the next few days adjusting to her new surroundings. She met with Sarah regularly, talking about her experiences, her fears, her hopes for the future. She started to open up, to share the details of her abuse, to express the emotions she had kept bottled up for so long. It was painful revisiting the trauma, but it was also cathartic. With each session, Mia felt a little lighter, a little less burdened. She was starting to understand that she was not to blame, that she was a victim, and that she deserved to heal. She also met other children at the Advocacy Center, young people who had experienced similar traumas. They shared their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. They formed a bond of understanding, a sense of community that helped Mia feel less alone. She learned about coping mechanisms, ways to manage her anxiety, her nightmares, her flashbacks. She practiced relaxation techniques, mindfulness exercises, and art therapy. She started to journal, writing down her thoughts and feelings, giving voice to the pain she had carried inside for so long. The staff at the Advocacy Center were incredibly supportive, providing a constant presence, a sense of security and stability. They treated Mia with respect and compassion, helping her to rebuild her sense of self-worth, her trust in others. One evening, Ms. Ramirez, the CPS worker, came to visit Mia. She told Mia that they had found a temporary foster home for her, a place called Havenwood, a specialized home for pregnant teens. "It's a beautiful place, Mia," Ms. Ramirez said. "It's a safe, nurturing environment with other young women who are going through similar experiences. You'll have your own room, and you'll receive prenatal care, counseling, and support." Mia was hesitant at first. The idea of moving again, of starting over in a new place, was daunting. But she knew she couldn't stay at the Advocacy Center forever. She needed a more permanent solution, a place where she could prepare for the arrival of her baby, a place where she could begin to build a new life. "Okay," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll go." The next day, Mia packed her few belongings, her heart filled with a mixture of apprehension and hope. She said goodbye to the staff and the other children at the Advocacy Center, thanking them for their kindness and support. as she drove away with MS. Ramirez, she looked back at the building, a place that had been her refuge, her sanctuary for the past few days. It was a place where she had begun to heal, to find her voice, to reclaim her life. The journey to Havenwood was long, but Mia didn't mind. She looked out the window, watching the scenery change from the urban sprawl to the rolling hills of the countryside. She felt a sense of peace, a sense of anticipation. She was leaving behind the darkness, the trauma, the fear. She was moving toward a new beginning, a new chapter in her life. She was taking the first steps on a long and difficult journey, but she was no longer alone. She had support, she had hope, and she had the strength to face whatever the future held. The place of refuge, the advocacy center, had been a stepping stone, a bridge between the horrors of her past and the possibilities of her future. And now, she was ready to take the next step, to embrace the challenges and the opportunities that lay ahead. The imposing facade of the county courthouse loomed before Mia, a symbol of the legal battle that lay ahead. She clutched MS. Ramirez's hand, her own palm sweating, her heart pounding in her chest. The prospect of facing Robert in court, of reliving the trauma in front of strangers, filled her with a mixture of dread and determination. Robert had been formally charged with multiple counts of aggravated assault, sexual abuse, and endangering the welfare of a child. He had pleaded not guilty, his lawyer, Mr. Thompson, vowing to vigorously defend his client. The legal process had been slow and arduous, a series of hearings, motions, and delays. Mia had been required to give depositions, to recount the details of her abuse to lawyers and investigators. It had been grueling, emotionally draining, but she had persevered, driven by a fierce desire to see justice served. Susan, Mia's mother, had also been charged with child endangerment and failure to protect. She had initially maintained her innocence, claiming she had no knowledge of Robert's abuse. But under the weight of the evidence and the threat of a lengthy prison sentence, she had eventually agreed to a plea bargain, pleading guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for her testimony against Robert. The trial was scheduled to begin in a few weeks. Mia knew it would be a public spectacle, a media circus that would expose her most private pain to the scrutiny of the world. But she was prepared. She had spent months working with Sarah Jenkins, her therapist, preparing for the cross-examination, learning how to stay calm and focused under pressure. She had also found strength in the support of the other young women at Havenwood, her foster home. They had shared their own stories of abuse and survival, offering her encouragement and understanding. They had become her family, her sisters in arms, bound together by a shared experience of trauma and resilience. As she entered the courthouse, Mia took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The hallways were crowded with people, lawyers, court officials, journalists, curious onlookers. She felt a wave of nausea, a surge of anxiety, but she forced herself to keep walking, to hold her head high. She saw her mother, Susan, sitting on a bench in the hallway, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and fear. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and Mia felt a pang of sadness, a flicker of the love she had once felt for her mother. But it was quickly replaced by a wave of anger, a sense of betrayal that still ran deep. Mia continued walking, entering the courtroom with MS. Ramirez by her side. The room was large and imposing, with high ceilings, dark wood paneling, and rows of empty seats. The judge's bench loomed at the front of the room, a symbol of authority and justice. Robert sat at the defendant's table, his lawyer, Mr. Thompson, beside him. He looked smaller than Mia remembered, less intimidating, but his eyes still held that same cold, calculating look that sent a shiver down her spine. The trial began with jury selection, a tedious process of questioning potential jurors, weeding out those who might be biased or prejudiced. Mia watched as lawyers from both sides argued over the merits of each candidate, trying to assemble a jury that would be sympathetic to their case. It took several days to select a jury, a panel of 12 men and women who would ultimately decide Robert's fate. Mia felt a sense of apprehension as she looked at their faces, wondering what they were thinking, whether they would believe her, whether they would see the truth. The trial itself was a grueling ordeal, a painful recounting of the abuse Mia had endured. The prosecution presented their case, calling witnesses to testify about Robert's behavior, about Mia's injuries, about the evidence they had gathered. Officer Daniels testified about his encounter with Mia on the highway, describing her desperate flight, her bloodied feet, her shocking revelation. He spoke with conviction and compassion, his testimony painting a vivid picture of Mia's trauma. The medical examiner testified about the physical evidence of abuse, the injuries, the signs of sexual assault. Her testimony was clinical and detailed, but it was also deeply disturbing, a stark reminder of the violence Mia had suffered. Ms. Evans, the CPS worker, testified about Mia's placement at the Advocacy Center in Havenwood, about her progress in therapy, about her resilience and determination to heal. The most difficult part of the trial for Mia was her own testimony. She took the stand, her heart pounding, her hands trembling. She swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The prosecutor, a woman named Ms. Johnston, no relation to previous nurse, guided Mia through her story, asking her to recount the details of the abuse, the years of violation, the constant fear and humiliation. Mia spoke slowly and deliberately, her voice clear and strong, despite the tears that streamed down her face. She described the physical violence, the sexual abuse, the threats, the manipulation. She told the jury about her pregnancy, about her desperate attempts to hide it, about her fear of what Robert would do if he found out. The courtroom was silent, the only sound Mia's voice and the occasional muffled sob. The jury listened intently, their faces etched with a mixture of horror, sympathy, and disbelief. It was a powerful, emotional testimony, a raw and honest account of the trauma she had endured. Then came the cross-examination. Mr. Thompson, Robert's lawyer, approached Mia with a predatory smile. He began his questioning gently, almost sympathetically, but his tone soon turned accusatory. He tried to paint Mia as a liar, a manipulator, a troubled teenager who had made up the allegations to get attention and to escape her home life. He questioned her credibility, bringing up her past truancy, her behavioral problems, her relationships with other boys. He suggested that she had consented to the sexual activity, that she had enjoyed it, that she was simply trying to get revenge on Robert for disciplining her. Mia held her ground, answering his questions truthfully and calmly, refusing to be intimidated. She had been through worse, and she would not be broken. She had Sarah Jenkins, her therapist, to thank for much of her strength. Sarah had helped her prepare, practice. Isn't it true, Ms. Miller, Mr. Thompson sneered, that you're just a rebellious teenager who doesn't like being told what to do? No, Mia replied firmly. I'm a survivor of abuse who is telling the truth. The cross-examination lasted for hours, a grueling ordeal that tested Mia's strength and resilience. But she emerged from it stronger, her credibility intact, her truth unshaken. The defense presented their case, calling witnesses who attempted to discredit Mia, to portray her as a liar and a troublemaker. They called a former neighbor who claimed to have seen Mia behaving inappropriately with boys. They called a school counselor who testified about Mia's truancy and disciplinary problems. But their efforts were largely unsuccessful. The prosecution effectively countered their arguments, presenting evidence that undermined their credibility and reinforced Mia's story. The final witness was Susan, Mia's mother. She took the stand, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and shame. She had agreed to testify against Robert as part of her plea bargain, and her testimony was crucial to the prosecution's case. Under questioning from Ms. Johnston, Susan admitted that she had known about the abuse, that she had seen the bruises on Mia's body, that she had heard her crying at night. She confessed that she had been afraid of Robert, afraid of what he would do to her, to Mia, if she spoke out. I was a coward, she sobbed. her voice choked with emotion. "I failed my daughter. I let him hurt her, and I did nothing to stop it." Her testimony was a devastating blow to the defense, a final nail in Robert's coffin. It corroborated Mia's story and exposed the full extent of Robert's cruelty and Susan's complicity. After Susan's testimony, both sides rested their cases. The jury was sent to deliberate to decide Robert's fate. The waiting was agonizing. Mia sat in a small room with MS. Ramirez and Sarah Jenkins, her therapist, her stomach churning with anxiety. She had done everything she could, told her story truthfully and courageously. Now it was out of her hands. Hours passed, stretching into an eternity. Finally, the jury returned. The courtroom was hushed as the foreman read the verdict. On the charge of aggravated assault, we find the defendant, Robert Miller, guilty. On the charge of sexual abuse, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of endangering the welfare of a child, we find the defendant guilty. A wave of relief washed over Mia, so intense that she felt weak. Justice had been served. Robert would be held accountable for his crimes. She looked at her mother, Susan, who was sobbing uncontrollably. Mia felt a mixture of pity and anger towards her mother, but also a glimmer of hope that they could eventually rebuild their relationship, somehow. Robert was subsequently sentenced to a lengthy prison term. Susan received a lighter sentence, probation and mandatory therapy, due to her cooperation with the prosecution. The trial was over, but the healing had just begun. Mia had faced her abuser, spoken her truth, and found justice. But the scars of the past would remain, a constant reminder of the pain she had endured. The legal proceedings had provided a measure of closure, a sense of accountability, but the true healing would come from within, from Mia's own strength, resilience, and the support of those who loved and cared for her. The wheels of justice had turned, grinding slowly but surely, delivering a verdict that affirmed Mia's truth and condemned her abuser. But the journey towards healing, towards rebuilding her life, was far from over. Havenwood was more than just a foster home. It was a sanctuary, a place of healing and growth. Nestled amidst rolling hills and lush green pastures, the large, Victorian-style house exuded warmth and tranquility. It was a haven for pregnant teenagers, a place where they could find support, understanding, and the resources they needed to build a better future for themselves and their babies. Mia had been apprehensive at first, unsure of what to expect. But the welcoming smiles of the staff and the other residents quickly put her at ease. She was given her own room, a cozy space decorated with soft colors and cheerful artwork. It was a far cry from the sterile environment of the hospital or the oppressive atmosphere of her former home. She quickly formed bonds with the other girls, sharing stories, laughter, and tears. They understood each other in a way that no one else could, having all experienced the trauma of abuse and the challenges of teenage pregnancy. They were a support system, a sisterhood, bound together by shared experiences and a common goal, to create a better life for themselves and their children. Mia continued her therapy with Sarah Jenkins, who visited Havenwood regularly. Sarah helped Mia process her trauma, develop coping mechanisms, and build her self-esteem. She taught Mia about the cycle of abuse, about the importance of setting boundaries, and about the power of forgiveness, not for the abuser, but for herself. Healing is a journey, Mia, Sarah would say. It's not a destination. There will be good days and bad days, ups and downs. But you are strong, you are resilient, and you are capable of overcoming this. Mia also attended prenatal classes, learning about childbirth, infant care, and parenting skills. She discovered a newfound excitement about becoming a mother, a sense of purpose and responsibility that overshadowed the fear and uncertainty she had felt before. She chose a name for her baby, a girl, Lily. It was a name that symbolized beauty, innocence, and new beginnings. It was a name that represented hope. As her pregnancy progressed, Mia felt a growing connection to her unborn child. She would talk to Lily, sing to her, read to her. She felt the baby move inside her, a fluttering sensation that filled her with awe and wonder. It was a tangible reminder of the life she was carrying, the future she was creating. She also started to think about her own future beyond motherhood. She had always been a good student, despite the challenges she had faced. She decided to finish high school, to get her diploma, and to pursue her dream of becoming a social worker. She wanted to help other young people who had been through similar experiences, to be a voice for the voiceless, to make a difference in the world. She enrolled in online classes, studying diligently in her spare time. The staff at Havenwood were incredibly supportive, providing her with tutoring, encouragement, and the resources she needed to succeed. The months passed quickly, filled with therapy sessions, prenatal appointments, classes, and the shared experiences of the young women at Havenwood. Mia blossomed, growing stronger, more confident, more resilient. She was healing, slowly but surely, transforming from a terrified, traumatized teenager into a strong, capable young woman. The day Lily was born was a day of joy and celebration. Mia labored for hours, supported by Sarah Jenkins and the staff at Havenwood. When Lily finally arrived, a healthy, beautiful baby girl, Mia felt a surge of love so intense, so overwhelming, that it brought tears to her eyes. Holding Lily in her arms, Mia knew that her life had changed forever. She was a mother, responsible for this precious, innocent being. She was determined to give Lily the love, the support, the security that she herself had never had. The seeds of hope, planted in the midst of despair, had finally blossomed. Mia's journey of healing and recovery was far from over, but she had found her strength, her purpose, and her future. She had transformed trauma into triumph, pain into power, and fear into hope. And with Lily by her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that she was no longer alone, that she was loved, and that she was capable of anything. 10 years had passed since Mia's barefoot flight down Highway 17. The landscape of her life had changed dramatically, shaped by the trauma she had endured, the justice she had sought, and the healing she had embraced. Mia was now 26, a confident, independent woman with a thriving career and a loving family. She had earned her bachelor's degree in social work and was working as a counselor at a shelter for abused women and children. She was passionate about her work, driven by a deep desire to help others overcome their trauma and rebuild their lives. She understood their pain, their fear, their struggles in a way that few others could. Lily, her daughter, was a bright, energetic 9-year-old, the light of Mia's life. She was a talented artist, a voracious reader, and a compassionate friend. She knew about her mother's past in an age-appropriate way, and she admired Mia's strength and resilience. Mia had met and married David, a different David, a kind and gentle man, a fellow social worker, 5 years earlier. They had a son, Noah, who was 3 years old. Their home was filled with love, laughter, and the joyful chaos of family life. Her relationship with her mother, Susan, was complex and evolving. After serving her probation and completing extensive therapy, Susan had made a genuine effort to make amends for her past mistakes. She had apologized to Mia, expressing her deep remorse for failing to protect her. Mia had struggled to forgive her mother, the wounds of betrayal running deep. But she had also come to understand the complex dynamics of abuse, the fear and manipulation that had kept Susan trapped in a cycle of violence. She had slowly, cautiously, allowed her mother back into her life, primarily for Lily's sake. Susan was a devoted grandmother, showering Lily and Noah with love and attention. While the relationship between Mia and Susan would likely never be fully healed, there was a fragile truce, a tentative understanding, a shared desire to move forward. Robert Miller remained in prison, serving his lengthy sentence. Mia had no contact with him, and she rarely thought about him. He was a part of her past, a dark chapter she had closed. She had found peace and closure, not through forgiveness, but through acceptance and the determination to build a better future. Officer Daniels, now retired from the State Patrol, remained a presence in Mia's life. They had stayed in touch over the years, their bond forged in the crucible of that fateful night on the highway. He had become a mentor, a friend, a father figure to Mia. He was incredibly proud of the woman she had become, of her strength, her resilience, and her commitment to helping others. He often said that Mia's case had been the most impactful of his career, a reminder of the profound difference one person can make in the life of another. The long-term consequences of the abuse were still present, woven into the fabric of Mia's life. She still struggled with occasional nightmares, flashbacks, and moments of anxiety. But she had learned to manage her trauma, to cope with the triggers, to live a full and meaningful life. She had transformed her pain into power, her vulnerability into strength. She often spoke at conferences and workshops, sharing her story, raising awareness about child abuse, and advocating for victims' rights. She was a powerful voice, a beacon of hope for those who had suffered in silence. One evening, as Mia tucked Lily into bed, Lily asked, "Mommy, why do you help people?" Mia smiled, stroking her daughter's hair. "Because everyone deserves to feel safe, Lily," she said. "Everyone deserves to be loved and protected. And because someone helped me when I needed it most." Lily nodded, her eyes wide with understanding. "Like Officer Daniels?" she asked. "Yes," Mia said, "like Officer Daniels. And like so many others who helped me along the way." As Mia looked at her daughter, sleeping peacefully in her bed, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had overcome unimaginable trauma, built a beautiful life for herself and her family, and found purpose in helping others. The horizon was bright, filled with possibilities, with hope, with the promise of a future free from fear. The long-term consequences were not just about the pain and the scars, but also about the resilience, the healing, and the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome adversity and create a life filled with love, purpose, and joy. The barefoot girl on the highway had found her way home, and she was now guiding others towards their own paths of healing and recovery.